It is 2 a.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. Welcome to the newscast. I'm Kim Hyun-ji. Beginning with the latest on the bird flu outbreak here in Korea. More than 200,000 chickens and ducks around the infected areas have been slaughtered, and the number of confirmed cases is on the up and up, raising fears that the virus may have spread nationwide. Our Kwon Soa has the latest.
Fears of a nationwide bird flu outbreak in Korea are growing. Disease prevention authorities said on Tuesday that they now suspect an avian influenza infection on a duck farm in the southern city of Jeongeup in Jeollabuk-do province. If their suspicions prove true, it would be the first case of AI infection outside of Gochang and Buan counties, the source of the recent AI outbreaks, meaning the risk of the birds carrying the virus to other places has increased. Earlier in the day, authorities confirmed that the number of poultry farms in Buan and Gochang that have ducks infected with the highly pathogenic H5N8 strain of avian influenza has risen to 4. The same strain of the virus was confirmed in a group of dead wild ducks found in a reservoir near a poultry farm in Gochang on Monday. Officials say this, as well as several more reports of suspicious cases, increases the chance that migratory ducks are the source of the bird flu outbreak. More specifically, they are pointing to a type of duck called the Baikal teal, which is said to have flown into the country from Russia for the winter. Korea has a total of 37 wintering sites for migratory birds. As a preventive measure, the Ministry of Environment has said it will track the Baikal teal's route via GPS. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs has decided to kill all poultry within 500 meters of the infected farms and has expanded the number of sterilization locations. Meanwhile, with H5N8 making its first appearance in the nation, there have been questions about whether the virus can be transferred to humans. Health authorities say that there have been no cases of H5N8 infecting humans worldwide. Food products are also said to be safe because there is a very slim chance that the infected products have or will enter the market. And even if they do, the virus is destroyed once cooked at 75 degrees Celsius for at least 5 minutes. Nevertheless, sales of poultry products have dropped significantly over the last couple of days. Kwon Soa, ARIRANG News.
Korea's financial institutions have been rattled by the nation's biggest ever information leak, and the firms in question are struggling to placate thousands of furious customers. The country's financial regulators have vowed to take appropriate punitive action and to prevent further damage. Our Kim Hyun-gil has more.
Thousands of angry customers are swarming into their banks for a second straight day on this Tuesday to get their credit card details changed and to file complaints about the bank's mismanagement of their personal information. Concerns arising that customers' information may have fallen into the hands of scammers, with reports emerging that suspicious and unintended financial transactions have been made on accounts. The leak is one of the worst in the country's history, with the personal data, bank account details, addresses and credit ratings of millions of people now out in the open. The three card firms KB Kookmin Card, NH Jeongeup Card and Lotte Card say they will fully cover any financial losses suffered by their customers from scams linked to the data leak. The Financial Supervisory Service and the Financial Services Commission plans to form a joint task force with the three firms to prevent further damage to victims and also toughen regulations for data breaches to counter possible crimes using the stolen data. Financial regulators will also punish the banks involved for their management failures. The firms have vowed to issue new cards to affected users and compensate for all financial and mental damages card users may have suffered. This information leak comes less than 1 month after the personal data of some 130,000 Standard Chartered Bank Korea and Citibank Korea customers was stolen. Kim Hyun-gil, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, the government says that on Wednesday, it will announce countermeasures to stop similar data leaks from recurring, as well as toughen penalties for those involved in leaking data. The number of bogus websites of financial institutions with malignant codes that dupe people into revealing their bank or credit card information has risen 79-fold in just 2 years. The Korea Internet and Security Agency says that the number of such websites in the January to November period last year was over 5,800, compared to just 74 in 2011. Last year's figure is also up nearly 40% from a year earlier. The numbers come as a surprise at a time when a massive personal data leak of at least 20 million credit card holders is raising concerns that the leaked information could be used by a ring of financial scammers. And it's not just Korea that's suffering from personal data leaks. Over in the U.S., similar data theft incidents have emerged to add to consumer concerns. The department store Neiman Marcus reported last week it was the victim of a cyber attack. The company said its computer network was hacked last July but went undetected until December. But it did not disclose the exact amount stolen. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway into one of the biggest data breaches in history at the retailer Target during the holiday shopping season last year. The number of customers whose personal data, including mailing addresses and phone numbers, as well as credit and debit card information, was stolen, is reported to have hit 110 million. Turning to President Park's state visit to Switzerland now, the Korean leader and her Swiss counterpart have pledged to work together to realize a so-called creative economy through technological cooperation and by fostering specialized personnel. Our presidential correspondent Oh Jin-ju, who is traveling with the president, sends us this report.
Cooperation in the sectors of industrial technology and education dominated summit talks Monday between President Park and President of the Swiss Confederation, Didier Burkhalter. The two leaders recognized the need to couple Switzerland's top-notch technology in precision machinery, chemical, nano, and bio industries with Korea's advanced manufacturing skills, a crucial point of cooperation in realizing the so-called creative economy.
스위스는 세계적인 기초과학 강국이고 또 한국은 IT와 응용 기술이 발달한 나라라서 양국의 협력이 서로에게 큰 도움이 될 거라고 생각합니다.
Out of the 11 MOUs and one agreement that were signed during the president's state visit, 3 were on technology cooperation. President Park also sought ways to harness the strengths of Korean and Swiss education to foster specialized personnel that can work well within the creative economy. Switzerland is well known for its educational system, which is based heavily on apprenticeship. Most high school students are trained in vocational schools called Berufsschule, where they spend 3 to 4 days a week in companies to gain experience in industrial settings. An MOU was signed between the two nations to provide opportunities for graduates of Korea's vocational high schools or Meister schools employed in Swiss companies operating in Korea to receive vocational training in Switzerland for a year. There are also a number of MOUs signed to boost trade and investment, including a social security agreement that would relieve Korean and Swiss employees working in each other's countries from double taxation. It wasn't just the economic topics that topped the summit agenda. The Swiss leader promised to throw full support behind Seoul's efforts to maintain stability on the Korean peninsula and persuade North Korea to denuclearize. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News, Bern.
The Korean trade official who was kidnapped in the Libyan capital of Tripoli on Sunday is safe, according to an official from Korea's foreign ministry, though he did not specify how the information was obtained. The official said the government is preparing for anything but cannot say whether the act was politically motivated. Han Seo-gu, the head of the local branch of the state-run Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency, was abducted by 4 armed men on his way home from work on Sunday evening, local time. The identity of Han's abductors is yet unknown, but there is speculation that Al-Qaeda may be involved. Let's take a look at how the market closed here in Seoul. Shares traded higher this Tuesday thanks to a rise in blue chip shares that offset investor uncertainties ahead of major earning reports due out this week. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi gained 0.5%, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq climbed 0.2%. The Korean currency closed at 1,065 won against the greenback. Today, we take a look at Korea's youth unemployment rate, which seems to be rising, despite the government's efforts to promote job creation and the idea of an economy that allows young entrepreneurs to turn their ideas into businesses. We now turn to Dr. Kim Byung-ju, the head of KLMP Consulting and a regular commentator on this program, who is with us on the line. Hello, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Well, recent statistics show that Korea's national unemployment rate is falling, but the youth unemployment rate seems to be rising. So what is happening here?
Right. Basically, the numbers show that last year, overall as a nation, we gained in terms of number of jobs. Last year's jobs increased from a year ago by about 386,000 new jobs indeed. And so overall, we achieved the employment ratio of almost close to 60%. Of course, measurement of employment ratio varies, but according to the official statistics, 59.5% employment ratio. So overall, we are seeing the number of jobs rising. Of course, not as much as we would like to see them, but it has been increasing. The overall trend, of course, the pace of it is kind of declining, a little bit slowing down, but still, indeed, we gained more jobs last year. The problem is, as you can see on the screen here, the youth unemployment is rising. It was falling for a few years, as you can see in the red bar on the screen, and then last year it rose up to about 8%. When the overall national total unemployment was continuing to decrease, reaching about 3.1%. So there is a big gap, as you can see on the screen, between the national total unemployment, which stood at 3.1% last year, as opposed to 8% unemployment ratio for the youth. So overall, this divergent trend itself is a big concern.
Right, and making things worse, it doesn't look like Korean firms will increase the number of new hires this year. So does this mean that we shouldn't expect to see the situation improve anytime soon?
Right, indeed. And new hiring by Korean companies is a very important part of the overall driver that can potentially increase youth employment, but that is not exactly happening. Particularly Korean youth, they are mostly highly educated, and they always want jobs at big companies, and these big companies are not hiring as much. For instance, out of the 500 largest companies in Korea this year, only 243 out of 500 are saying they will be hiring new people and increase. They will be hiring in total about 30,000 people, and that's about the reduction of 1.5% among those top 500 companies. And among the 30 largest Jeollabuk groups, only 6 of them are saying they will actually increase new hiring this year. So this is a quite detrimental aspect of the overall youth unemployment youth employment market, where most predominantly majority of youth actually are going for new jobs, new hirings at these large Jeollabuk big corporations. And these big corporations are saying, well, we cannot increase this new hirings when we see this situation of a lot of uncertainties. We still have a lot of labor issues here, and we're not exactly sure how supposedly recovering global market will actually help them expand their business. So that's a very challenging situation we're talking about.
Right, indeed. And recent reports have mentioned the idea of generational conflicts in the Korean job market. Mm-hmm. What does the term mean?
Yeah, basically we're going back to the first point we were talking about. Overall, what's happening is for those Koreans in their 20s, overall number of people who are working has decreased last year from the previous year by about 43,000. And those Koreans in their 30s working, the number has decreased by about 21,000 from the previous year. While last year, those Koreans in their 50s, those people who are working, the number of them has increased by 254,000, and those Koreans in their 60s who are working, their number have increased by about 181,000. So indeed, older Koreans are working more while younger Koreans are working less. So indeed, it feels like it's kind of a zero-sum game where all the people seem to be, at least in the eyes of the younger people, taking their jobs. So there is that component of so-called generational conflict.
Mm-hmm. Well, President Park Geun-hye is attending the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and there, too, youth unemployment has been cited as one of the biggest global challenges. Is that true?
Right, indeed. For this year, every year, indeed, World Economic Forum issues so-called Global Risk Report, and this year's report points out the youth unemployment is two of the most important issues for the world, and the other one being economic polarization. And they're saying this youth unemployment, together with economic polarization, actually could increase political volatility, political instability, and therefore this could be a big threat and challenge for the global stability.
Right. And is there anything Korea can learn from Switzerland, where the forum is taking place, about how to better tackle the rising youth unemployment rate?
Well, I think Jeonjuja has just reported on several points where Switzerland is doing really well. And recently, actually, a few days ago, FKI, Federation of Korean Industries, actually, released a report saying the strength of Switzerland economy. And there they were pointing out overall Switzerland is very strong in terms of youth education and keeping the society as open as possible and keeping the minds of the people as open as possible. And about the youth, employment side, as Jeonju reported, their vocational schools are very strong. Switzerland has the ratio of high school graduates entering the college that reaches about below 30%. Here in Korea, it's way over 90% here. So our youth are overeducated, and then creates real discrepancy between the market need on one hand and the supply side on the other. So Switzerland is doing a good job in matching the supply and demand, while Korea is struggling on that side. So I think we have a lot to learn. We can learn a lot from Switzerland in this case. So hopefully this presidential visit will be a trigger point where we will look into the countries like Switzerland and learn some lessons and important lessons for addressing the issue of youth unemployment.
That's right. Well, thank you, Dr. Kim, for sharing your insight with us today. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Independent lawmaker An Chol-soo now says his new political party will launch in March, in time for the upcoming local elections in June. Speaking at a press conference on Tuesday, Yoon Yeo-jun, co-chair of An's new politics committee, said that the committee will launch a preparatory body to oversee the party's formation sometime next month. This means that the June 4th local elections will be a three-way competition between the ruling and main opposition parties and An's new party. Yoon said that they will do their best to launch the party by March and do it in a way that people want, so they can do well in the June local elections. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns, who is visiting Seoul this week, says North Korea's recent peace offensive is a cause for concern that could be an early indicator of provocations to come. Our Hwang Sung-in reports.
North Korea has seemingly been on a peace offensive in the new year. But visiting U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns says the regime's tendency to have a sudden change of attitude worries Washington.
Well, I think the United States and our friends here in the Republic of Korea share a lot of concern about the recent behavior of the DPRK leadership and the dangers of further reckless behavior and provocation in the future.
There was a dramatic change in Pyongyang's attitude towards Seoul after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's once powerful uncle Jang Sung-taek was executed late last year. Following its proposal last week to end all cross-border slandering, Pyongyang has persistently expressed a strong will to improve inter-Korean ties. South Korea scoffed at the offer, with President Park Geun-hye telling the government to remain vigilant as the North engages in its propaganda offensive. After a meeting with South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Kim Gyu-hyun in Seoul on Tuesday, Burns reaffirmed Washington's commitment to its ally.
I express once again the strong American support for President Park's principled approach to the DPRK and stressed once again the strong American support for the defense and security of the Republic of Korea.
Burns, who now heads to China, says demonstrating solidarity between Seoul and Washington is the best way to respond to any unpredictable actions taken by the North Korean leadership. 황상희, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea's foreign ministry on Monday strongly condemned remarks made by a top Japanese official who called Korean independence fighter An Jung-geun a terrorist. Earlier in the day, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said that An was a terrorist in response to the opening of a memorial hall to honor the Korean hero in the Chinese city of Harbin. The foreign ministry said it was shocking that a person who speaks on behalf of the Japanese government made such ignorant remarks that go against history. It said that An is a highly respected figure not only in Korea but around the world for the sacrifice he made to achieve peace in Asia. In 1909, An shot and killed Hirobumi Ito, the Japanese governor of Korea at the time. The ministry said Ito was the main culprit who led Japan's invasion of Korea and accused the Abe administration of glorifying Japan's imperialistic past. After days of will they or won't they, the main opposition group in Syria, the Syrian National Coalition, has confirmed that it will attend peace talks in Switzerland on Wednesday, after the UN withdrew its controversial invitation for Iran to attend. Our Park Ji-won has more.
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon withdrew his invitation for Iran to attend the much-anticipated peace talks on Syria, set to begin in Switzerland this week, after Iran refused to accept a 2012 Geneva deal calling for a transitional government for Syria.
The Secretary-General is deeply disappointed by Iranian public statements today that are not at all consistent with that stated commitment. Given that it has chosen to remain outside that basic understanding, he has decided that the one-day Montreux gathering will proceed without Iran's participation.
The UN's controversial last-minute decision to invite Iran had threatened to jeopardize the talks before they had even started, as Syria's main opposition group, the Syrian National Coalition, said it would not participate in the talks unless Iran, one of the Assad regime's major backers, was disinvited, and Tehran stopped exerting a military influence over Syria. After the UN withdrew Iran's invitation, the Syrian National Coalition confirmed its participation at the peace talks.
The National Coalition welcomes the decision of the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, in withdrawing the invitation that was sent to Iran. The National Coalition also would like to confirm its attendance to Geneva II conference and its participation in it.
The peace talks, involving some 30 countries, are scheduled to begin Wednesday in Montreux, Switzerland. On Friday, talks between the Syrian government and opposition delegations will continue in Geneva. More than 100,000 people have been killed and millions more displaced since the Syrian conflict broke out some 3 years ago. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
In another news, the world's largest brewer, Anheuser-Busch InBev, says it will pay $5.8 billion to buy back Korea's leading beer company, OB. Industry watchers expect the buyout to further intensify competition in the local beer market. Our Connie Kim reports.
Belgian-Brazilian multinational brewer Anheuser-Busch InBev has bought back Korea's top-selling beer brand, Oriental Brewery, from KKR and Affinity Equity Partners as it moves to boost sales in the Asia-Pacific region. AB InBev announced Monday it had struck a $5.8 billion deal with KKR and Affinity, buying OB back for 3 times more than the $1.8 billion it sold it for in 2009. An industry source says, however, that the huge outlay is seen as a reasonable price for AB InBev, as OB, once the second leading beer brand in Korea, now accounts for more than 60% of total beer sales in the nation. AB InBev, the world's leading brewer, has relatively small presence in the Asia-Pacific region, taking up less than 15% of total beer sales in the area in 2012. It said Korea is an attractive beer market with strong potential to grow, given that the Korean beer market grows at 2% annually. Analysts also noted the fast growth of the imported beer market at 10% every year. They say the purchase of OB with top-selling lager Cass could mark the start of a big push into the Asia-Pacific market, including China. Korea's domestic beer market is controlled by OB and rival Hait Jinlo, taking up 90% of the market. OB surpassed Hait in 2011, and the gap between the two companies is expected to widen with AB InBev jumping into the Korean market. And with conglomerate Lotte Group set to start producing its own beer this year, competition in the local beer market is expected to intensify even more. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Well, that does it for now. For the latest, stay tuned to ARIRANG. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.